Hello, my name is Samantha Hayes. I'm 30 years old. And this was the night my own family told me I'd never be anything. You'll never be more than a handyman. Mom's voice cut through the clatter of forks, sharp as a blade. Rebecca, my older sister, raised her glass and smirked, sealing the verdict. Their laughter was low, but it burned hotter than fire. They thought sawdust under my nails made me worthless. They thought my story ended at failure. But by my feet, Dad's wooden box waited. And inside it was the truth they never expected. Growing up, I learned silence faster than I learned words. Rebecca spoke and people listened. I spoke and people sighed. Mom lined our report cards on the counter every semester. Rebecca's A's glowed in red ink, trophies in neat rows. My B's and C's looked like stains beside them. Some kids just aren't cut out for school, Mom said. She smiled at Rebecca, never at me. When Rebecca got into law school, Mom threw a party. Neighbors came. Balloons filled the house. Cake piled high. Her success was celebrated like a national holiday. That same week, I finished carving a jewelry box from cedar. I brought it into the kitchen, proud, hands raw from sanding. Mom glanced once, then waved me toward the vacuum. Guests are coming. Don't leave sawdust everywhere. Dad was the only one who stopped to see me. He lifted the box, traced the grooves, smiled slow. Your hands see what others don't, he whispered. But his voice faded after he died, and Mom's replaced it. She didn't scream. She didn't have to. Her clipped sighs, her raised eyebrows, her muttered comments, they carved deeper than any chisel. At every dinner table, Rebecca's wins stretched like banners. I was background noise, the one who cleared plates. I tried college once, desperate to match them. But lecture halls felt like cages. Essays collapsed under my pen. When I failed biology, Rebecca laughed in the hallway. Of course you did. Wood chips don't belong in labs. Mom nodded, almost pleased. At least you know your place now. Do something small. Small. That word stuck. It echoed when I worked odd jobs, when I skipped reunions. It chased me even in Dad's workshop, the one place I breathed. The smell of pine, the scrape of sandpaper, the ache in my arms, those were mine. But outside those walls, I was still small. Every time Mom's voice replayed, Rebecca's the lawyer, you're just the helper. I shrank a little more. I thought the script was written. My story already finished before I had a chance to start. But Dad didn't leave me small. He left me something bigger, hidden where no one else bothered to look. And the day I opened that wooden box, everything shifted. After Dad's funeral, I kept showing up at the workshop. The others didn't bother. Rebecca was too busy with internships and law journals. Mom was too busy polishing her image for church. So it was just me and the sawdust. The air smelled of cedar and varnish, and the light through the cracked windows fell in stripes across the benches. Every nail I hammered, every edge I sanded, felt like a conversation with him. A way to keep him close when no one else would. Money was tight. I patched together shifts at a diner and evening jobs at the hardware store. Most nights I came home bone-tired, fingers blistered from scrubbing dishes or lifting lumber. But I still turned the light on in the workshop, still picked up the chisel. I started small. Birdhouses, shelves, stools for neighbors. One customer told another, and slowly word spread. Soon, I had steady orders scribbled on scraps of paper, cash tucked in envelopes, and smiles from families who couldn't afford fancy furniture, but wanted something built with care. It wasn't glamorous. My Honda rattled on the freeway. My clothes came from thrift stores. But in my hands, wood turned into something real, something that outlasted the laughter at the dinner table. Mom never asked about it. Rebecca scoffed whenever she saw me post a picture online. Cute hobby, she'd comment. Shame it doesn't pay rent. I deleted the comments. But their sting stayed long after the screen went dark. Still, customers kept knocking. A cafe downtown asked for custom tables. A yoga studio wanted shelving. The orders filled weekends, then weeknights. I poured every dollar back into tools. Into stronger clamps and sharper blades. Into sanders that didn't leave my arms aching for days. By my second year, the workshop wasn't just surviving. It was mine. I carved my logo into the bottom of each piece. Hayes Woodworks. Quiet. Simple. Mine. But the more the shop grew, the more I felt the box pressing on my conscience. The wooden box Dad left. The one I had tucked in the corner of the workshop. Gathering dust. I hadn't opened it in years. Afraid it would be nothing. Just scraps, old receipts, a photo or two. Afraid it would prove I was really small. That Dad had left me nothing worth holding. But the shop's hum kept whispering otherwise. Each order finished, each smile from a customer, was proof that Dad had seen something in me no one else had. Maybe the box wasn't just sentimental. Maybe it was his final word, his final truth. One night, the rain drummed steady on the roof, and the smell of pine filled the air. I sat at the bench, box in front of me, its brass latch worn smooth from years of my fingers brushing it. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside was more than I ever expected. The box didn't creak when it opened. It groaned, like it had been holding its breath for years. Inside, stacked neatly, were envelopes sealed with Dad's handwriting. The first one I opened wasn't long. Just a letter in his familiar scrawl. "Sam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Your hands, the ones that shaped wood with me, they're the only ones I trust to carry this place forward. Don't let anyone tell you different." I pressed the paper to my chest, the ink smudging under my fingertips, his words cut deeper than Mom's ever had, but in a way that healed instead of wounded. Beneath the letter were documents, heavy with seals. Legal papers, notarized, stamped with the county courthouse emblem. My breath hitched as I read the title line. Last Will and Testament. Not the copy Mom had shown us after the funeral. Not the one that split everything between her and Rebecca. This one was different. This one named me. The workshop. The land it stood on. The family home attached to it. All of it mine. Dad hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't overlooked me. He had entrusted me. Deliberately, directly, without hesitation. So why had I never seen this before? Why had Mom only pulled out a different will? One that erased me from the picture? The realization hit like a hammer to the ribs. They had hidden it. They had locked away Dad's last words, buried his truth under their version of success. And I had believed them. For years I carried their script, their mockery, while the real story sat in a box gathering dust. My chest burned, part fury, part vindication. Every sigh, every jab about being small, suddenly twisted into something uglier. A strategy, not just cruelty. They wanted me out, wanted me erased, so Rebecca could shine uncontested. I looked around the workshop, the walls glowing in lamplight, the tools lined like soldiers, every scar in the wood shouting proof. This was mine, always had been, and Dad had known. I folded the papers back into the envelope, hands steadier than I expected. The next family dinner wouldn't end the way they planned. I wasn't coming to sit quietly. I was coming with the truth in hand, the truth they had buried but couldn't silence. For the first time, I wasn't the one waiting for scraps of respect. I was the one holding the cards. And when I placed them on the table, Rebecca and Mom would finally choke on their own lies. The dining room glowed like a stage, every plate polished, every glass catching the chandelier's light. Mom sat at the head, Rebecca beside her, as if the seats were crowns. I slid into my chair, the wooden box at my feet. Mom barely glanced at me. "You're late," she said, voice clipped. Rebecca smirked, swirling her wine, probably lost in the workshop, pretending sawdust is success. I didn't answer. I let them fill the air with their usual lines. Rebecca listing her cases, Mom nodding proudly. Their words bounced around the room. The same script they'd always performed. Finally, Mom turned to me, fork tapping the rim of her plate. "And you, Samantha? Still tinkering with birdhouses? Still playing pretend?" Laughter rippled between them, brittle and sharp. My chest tightened, but not from shame. From the weight of the envelope in my hand. I set down my fork, slow. The scrape of metal against china silenced the room. I reached under the table, lifted the box, and placed it on the linen cloth. Rebecca frowned. "What's this? Another toy from Dad's shop?" Her laugh faltered when I opened the lid. Inside lay the papers, edges worn, Dad's handwriting across the top. I pulled out the envelope, slid the documents across the table toward Mom. "Read it," I said, my voice steady. She hesitated, then unfolded the first page. Her face drained as the words sank in. Rebecca leaned closer. "What is it?" Her eyes scanned the page. When she reached my name, her jaw dropped. "That's not possible," she whispered. "This can't be real." "It's notarized," I said. "County seal, signatures, all of it. Dad left the workshop and the house to me. Not to you, not to Mom. To me?" The silence was thick, the kind that made the air feel heavy. Mom's hand trembled as she gripped her fork. "You weren't supposed to see this," she snapped. Her voice cracked, anger covering fear. "You wouldn't know what to do with it anyway." Rebecca's smirk had vanished, replaced by something brittle, almost panicked. "This changes nothing," she hissed. "You're still nothing without us." I leaned forward, my voice low, every word cutting clean. "You've spent years telling me I was small. But Dad didn't think so. And now, neither do these papers." Mom slammed the document shut, but the echo rang hollow. Rebecca reached for her wine, hands shaking enough to spill drops on the cloth. They both looked at me, but for once, neither had the words. I stood, chair scraping loud against the floor. The sound was final, undeniable. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the box. "Dinner's over," I said, turning toward the door. "And so is your version of the story." The chandelier light flickered as if the house itself knew. Rebecca's breath hitched, Mom's fork clattered. But I didn't stop. For once, the silence belonged to them, and the power belonged to me. I didn't slam the door when I left that night. I didn't need to. The silence I left behind was louder than any shout. Back at the workshop, I set the box on the bench. The lamplight caught the seal of Dad's will, and for the first time I felt its weight settle into me, not as a burden, but as a crown. The days that followed blurred into movement. Lawyers confirmed what the papers said. The county clerk stamped my name into records. The workshop, the land, the home, all of it was legally, irrevocably mine. Mom called once. I let it ring out. Rebecca sent a message, a single line. "You'll regret this." I deleted it before the sting could reach me. Instead, I poured myself into building. Not just furniture, but a future. Orders grew, customers lined up, and soon Hayes Woodworks wasn't just a name. It was a business, a brand, a piece of me that people could hold in their hands. I hired 2 apprentices, kids from the neighborhood, who never fit into classrooms any more than I had. I taught them what Dad taught me. Your hands can see what others don't. And every piece we sent out carried that truth. Success didn't look like Rebecca's corner office. It didn't look like Mom's polished dinner parties. It looked like sawdust on the floor, the steady hum of tools, and a future carved from the very thing they mocked. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Mom's voice. "You'll never be more than a handyman." But now I smile. Because she was right, in a way. I am a handyman. And that's more than enough. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you were too small, remember this. Your worth isn't measured by their applause. It's carved in how you keep showing up, day after day, until the truth speaks for itself. Have you ever faced something like this in your family? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if mine gave you strength, don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories of truth, betrayal, and taking your life back.
The lock clicked into place with a sharp finality. I stood in the hallway, 5 days deep into this punishment, the cool hardwood pressing into my bare feet. Through the frosted glass of the kitchen door, I saw silhouettes: my mother plating food, my sister seated at the table, my father unfolding his napkin. The smell of roasted chicken floated through the gap beneath the door. It made my stomach cramp so hard I had to hold the wall for balance. "No dinner for liars," my mother called, her voice bright and practiced, like it was some inside joke. My father didn't laugh. He just said, "This is good for you." It hadn't always been like this. 6 months ago, the punishments were smaller. No dessert if I talked back. No seconds if I forgot to say thank you. At first, I thought I could earn the food back. I apologized. I offered to do extra chores. But the rules kept changing, slippery as oil. The real shift came when I asked why Miri, my 13-year-old sister, got new shoes for school while I was still wearing the ones with frayed seams and soles that flapped when I walked. My mother called it ungrateful. My father said I was creating problems. That night, I didn't get dinner. The next time, it was breakfast too. After that, it became normal, expected. Now the kitchen door was locked with a deadbolt I wasn't allowed to touch. I had stopped asking. I'd stopped knocking. I just stood there, hand on my rib cage, counting heartbeats until the hallway stopped spinning, behind the glass. Someone laughed. A fork scraped a plate. I turned away. Upstairs, I had a bottle of water and 1 granola bar left, hidden under the mattress. It started with a slip. Mrs. Darnell asked me why I hadn't turned in my worksheet, and I told her the truth without thinking I've been dizzy. It's hard to focus. She looked at me longer than usual, her eyes narrowing like she saw something I hadn't meant to show. Then she asked if I'd eaten breakfast. I hesitated. Not really. I said, "Not in a couple days." I didn't mean it as a cry for help. I was just answering a question. But by lunch, the counselor was pulling me into her office. That same afternoon, the school called home. When I walked through the door that evening, my mother was waiting. She didn't scream. That would have been easier. Instead, she smiled tight, deliberate, and said, "We feed our daughter perfectly well." Her voice was loud enough to be heard by whoever might be listening. Then she turned to me, voice quieter, deadlier. "You want attention so badly you'll lie to strangers." Now I didn't lie. I said, She stepped forward. You told them we don't feed you. I just said I was dizzy. I didn't mean stop talking. The next morning, the kitchen door was locked, not just with the usual child-proof knob cover, a full lock, metal bolt. I wasn't even offered water with breakfast. I heard Miri chewing pancakes as I walked past the door. Later that day, I heard her on the phone with someone, maybe the school again. She's going through a phase, my mother said. She lies for sympathy. We're handling it with appropriate discipline. Discipline. That word became a knife I carried in my stomach. Sharp, silent, invisible. My father never questioned it. He just nodded when she spoke. He nodded a lot. I stayed in my room the rest of the night, rereading biology notes I could barely focus on, trying to remember when the truth had stopped mattering. That night, I sat on the stairs, just outside view of the kitchen but close enough to hear the clink of forks and the scrape of plates. The smells were unbearable: garlic, roasted vegetables, something buttery and warm. My stomach twisted, hollow and sharp. Is Sable eating with us? Miri asked. No, my father replied. Since she can't appreciate family meals, she doesn't get to participate. But she'll eat when she learns respect, he added. Firm. A little hunger builds character. It wasn't the first time I'd heard him say that. It used to be about forgotten chores or missed curfews. Now it was about opinions, tone, even silence. I pressed my palm against the floor, grounding myself while my head swam. Upstairs, I'd hidden a granola bar under my mattress when I'd stolen from Isla's lunch when she wasn't looking. I told myself I'd replace it somehow, but that felt like a lie. Survival made liars of everyone. I ate half of it in the bathroom, careful not to leave crumbs, washing it down with cold tap water like it was something indulgent. The next day, I went to school lightheaded but steadier. During lunch, I sat next to Isla and kept my eyes on the table while she unwrapped her sandwich. You're not eating, she asked. Not hungry, I said, the words already automatic. When I got home, the house was quiet. I went to my room and reached beneath the mattress for the rest of the granola bar. It was gone. Later, my mother knocked once, then walked in without waiting. She held the empty wrapper like evidence in a trial. Hoarding food, she said. That's a red flag. You're building disordered patterns. We're doing this for your own good. I wanted to scream, but my throat burned instead. I wanted to ask how someone could create the very thing they claimed to prevent. But I knew better. I kept quiet, eyes fixed on the floor. That night, the pantry was locked too. Even the fruit bowl disappeared from the counter. I cinched my skirt tighter that morning, but it still slipped down over my hips. The waistband had nothing left to grip. My mirror showed someone unfamiliar: hollow cheeks, dark circles, arms like sticks. I layered a cardigan over my uniform and hoped no one would notice. At school, I moved slowly, careful not to waste energy. I skipped PE by saying I had cramps. I did have cramps, but they weren't the kind anyone could fix with a heating pad. During lunch, Isla offered me half her banana. I shook my head. I'm good, I said. She frowned, but didn't push. She was used to me saying that now. By sixth period, my head was pounding. Biology. Mr. Rodriguez was talking about survival mechanisms in extreme conditions. He wrote something on the board starvation response, then turned and said, when the body is deprived of calories for extended periods, it starts by consuming fat reserves. He kept going, then muscle. And in the most severe cases, even organ tissue begins to break down. I gripped the side of my desk, trying to keep my balance. The letters in my notebook swam. My vision pulsed at the edges. I could hear him still talking about adaptability, about the body's will to survive, but it felt distant, like I was underwater. I blinked, once, twice, trying to clear the blur. My pen slipped from my hand, and then I was falling. Chairs scraped, voices rose. My face hit something hard, cold linoleum. For a moment, I was aware of arms catching me too late, the sound of my name being shouted, Then everything went quiet. I woke to fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of antiseptic. My head throbbed. A blood pressure cuff tightened around my arm, and I saw Mrs. Chin, the school nurse, leaning over me. "Sable," she said, voice gentle but urgent. "Can you hear me?" I nodded slightly. "When did you last eat something I tried to remember? The granola bar. 2 days ago. Or was it 3? I opened my mouth. But no sound came. She helped me sit up slowly, her hand warm against my back. "We're going to get you checked out. You're safe." "Okay." I didn't know what that meant. She pointed to the scale in the corner. "Let's see where we're at." I stood, unsteady. The numbers blinked. 84. The numbers flashed once more, 84, and then settled. I stared at them like they belonged to someone else. Mrs. Chin didn't say anything at first. She just pressed her lips together, her eyes moving from the scale to my arms, then back again. Her expression changed, like something inside her had snapped from concern into certainty. "Have you lost weight recently?" she asked. I shrugged. "I think so. A little." She pointed at the chart from last week's check-in. "You weighed 89 last Tuesday." I felt my legs go weak. I gripped the edge of the nurse's cot for balance. "I'm fine," I whispered. "You're not fine. Sable," she said, already reaching for the phone on her desk. "You're down 5 pounds in 7 days. That's not just a growth spurt, that's medical danger." "Please don't," I said, voice cracking. "Please, don't call anyone." She paused, the receiver halfway to her ear. "Why not?" I hesitated. "My parents. They'll be mad. They'll think I'm making it a big deal." Her voice softened, but her hands didn't stop moving. "I know you're scared, but you need help. This is serious. I don't have an eating disorder." I blurted. "I didn't say you did. I'm not starving myself. I'm not doing this on purpose." Mrs. Chin held my gaze. "Who's withholding your food?" "Sable." I opened my mouth to lie. To say something easy I forget to eat. I skip meals. I've just been stressed. But the words wouldn't come. My mouth moved, but nothing landed. There was nothing left in me to spin another version of their story. She picked up the phone and dialed anyway. I sat down, trembling. While she spoke to the dispatcher, I caught fragments: severe weight loss, unresponsive in class, risk of malnutrition. When she hung up, she knelt in front of me. "An ambulance is on the way. They'll take you to get checked out. You're safe now." "Okay, safe." The word felt foreign, dangerous. Even, "They'll be angry," I said again. She didn't argue. She just laid a hand on my knee and said, "Sometimes the truth makes people angry. That doesn't make it wrong." The sirens came quicker than I expected. I heard them through the window before I saw the flashing lights. As the paramedics entered the room, I pulled my sleeves down over my wrists and lowered my eyes. I didn't speak when they asked questions. I just let them do what they needed to do: blood pressure, oxygen, vitals. I lay back as they strapped me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me through the hallway, I saw faces in the classroom windows, curious, shocked, whispering. Some of them knew me. Most didn't. But it didn't matter. My secret wasn't mine anymore. The hospital room was cold, but not unkind. The sheets were stiff, the lights too bright, and everything smelled like plastic and lemon cleaner. Still, it felt safer than home. Dr. Kumar introduced herself softly. Her hands were steady, her eyes calm. She didn't start with hard questions, just a few about how I was feeling, if I had any nausea, if the IV was bothering me. I answered in short phrases, nods, anything that would get her to move on. She didn't. Instead, she pulled a chair beside my bed and said, "Sable, I want to ask you something that might be difficult. You don't have to answer if you're not ready." I nodded again. "Are you choosing not to eat, or is someone preventing you from accessing food?" My throat tightened. I looked away, pretending to study the monitor's soft beeping. "I'm not anorexic," I mumbled. "I didn't say you were. I just forget sometimes. Every day, she asked gently. Silence stretched between us. My fingers curled into the hospital blanket. Dr. Kumar leaned in. Sable, who's restricting your food? The air in the room thickened. I could feel it sitting on my chest. I swallowed hard. They locked the kitchen. I whispered. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask why. She just nodded slowly, as if the answer had only confirmed what she already knew. Your parents. I nodded. And how long has this been happening? I hesitated. A few months. It started small. Less dessert. No seconds. But then they said I needed to learn gratitude. They said hunger builds character. Dad says I'll eat when I learn respect. Dr. Kumar's jaw tensed for just a moment. Then she stood and placed a hand on my arm. Thank you for telling me. After she left, a nurse came in and began writing things down. More blood tests. Heart monitoring. The room filled with quiet urgency, like they were all piecing something together that I had tried so hard to keep scattered. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket up to my chin. For the first time, I wasn't sure if protecting them had ever protected me at all. I didn't know they were bringing Miri until I heard her voice in the hallway. She sounded small, smaller than usual. I couldn't make out the words, just the way she spoke them, hesitant and unsure. A nurse peeked into my room, then opened the door wider. Behind her stood my little sister, arms folded, eyes wide. She stepped in slowly, clutching the sleeves of her hoodie. I watched her take in the machines, the IV line in my arm, the way I couldn't even sit up without help. Her mouth trembled. She didn't come closer, just stood near the foot of the bed like she wasn't sure she was allowed. They said I could visit, she said softly. I nodded. Okay. A social worker stood just outside the door, watching, not interrupting. Miri didn't speak for a long time. She looked around the room, at the beeping machines, at the blood pressure cuff still wrapped around my arm. Then, finally, she said, I didn't know it was this bad. I couldn't answer. She looked at the nurse, then back at me. Are you in trouble, No? I said, Not anymore. Her eyes welled up. She glanced toward the door, then stepped closer. Voice barely audible. Sometimes, Mom makes me eat in front of you. She says it's to teach you a lesson. My chest ached, but not from hunger. I hear you crying at night, she said. I try not to. But I do. Behind her, the social worker's face changed. She stepped into the room with a notepad. I wanted to give you something, Miri added, reaching into her hoodie pocket, a granola bar. She placed it on the bedside table like it was something sacred. The social worker asked Miri to sit and gently began asking questions. Miri answered them all. And just like that, the story I had carried alone cracked open. The nutritionist came in that afternoon, clipboard in hand, eyes serious but kind. She didn't ask me anything at first. She just explained what she'd reviewed my labs, my weight history, the notes from the ER team. I want to be very clear. She said, This isn't anorexia. This isn't self-restriction. What we're seeing here is consistent with involuntary starvation. The words landed like a stone in my chest. She walked me through the data: severe vitamin deficiencies, muscle loss, electrolyte imbalances. My heart rhythm was unstable. My liver was showing signs of stress. She said if things had continued even another few weeks, there could have been permanent organ damage. Maybe worse. We see this kind of malnutrition in extreme cases: famine victims, prisoners of war, not in teenagers living at home. I stayed quiet. I didn't know how to speak around the lump in my throat. We're making a mandatory report, she added. The authorities have been contacted. For a moment, I felt panic rise in me, like I needed to take it back, like I should have lied after all. But then I remembered Miri's face, the way her hands had shaken when she gave me that granola bar, and I didn't say a word. Later, I heard quiet voices outside the door, someone confirming police would arrive soon, that the report had been filed. The nurse came in to check my IV. She didn't say anything, but her hand was gentle on my arm. I lay back against the pillows, my body still weak, my mind louder than it had ever been. Whatever this had been lesson, punishment, discipline, it had a new name now. They arrived just before sunset. I heard my mother's voice before I saw her sharp, rehearsed outrage echoing down the hallway. "This is absurd," she said to someone. "Our daughter has a history of manipulation. She's always been dramatic. We've done everything we can for her." A moment later, they were at the doorway, flanked by a man in a gray suit, some lawyer I didn't recognize. My father didn't look at me. My mother did, and her face was carefully arranged, like she was performing. "You look awful," she said, almost with pity. "See, this is what she does. She makes herself sick for attention." No one responded. Dr. Kumar stood beside the bed, calm and unmoved. The social worker stepped forward. A police officer entered the room without fanfare, holding a clipboard. "We've reviewed the evidence," he said flatly. "Your daughter's medical records show severe malnutrition. There are documented signs of intentional deprivation. A food restriction chart was found in the home. Your other child has confirmed the kitchen was locked." My mother turned toward the lawyer, sputtering. My father finally looked at me, just once, his jaw tight. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Dr. Kumar replied, her voice like steel. The officer moved forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Marin, you're under arrest for child endangerment, neglect, and abuse." My mother protested as they placed handcuffs around her wrists. "We gave her everything we were trying to fix her. The officer didn't flinch. You nearly killed her." They walked out without another word. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd carried before, but for the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone. The pantry in my aunt's house doesn't even have a door, just open shelves lined with cereal boxes, dried fruit, canned soup. There's always a bowl of bananas on the counter, always cheese in the fridge. No one keeps count. No one locks anything. I still flinch sometimes when the microwave beeps. I still ask before taking seconds, even though I don't need to. My aunt never comments. She just passes me the bread and reminds me there's more in the toaster. Miri and I cook dinner together now. Nothing fancy pasta. Scrambled eggs, grilled cheese, but it feels like a ritual. Her hands are more confident than mine in the kitchen. She grates too much cheese and dares me to say something about it. Once, while slicing apples, she looked up and said, "Remember when Mom said hunger builds character?" I nodded. She said it a lot. "She was wrong," Miri said, tossing a slice into her mouth. Surviving her built character. The hunger just built trauma. We didn't laugh, but we smiled a little. It felt like something closing. My therapist says healing isn't a straight line. Some nights I still dream of locked doors and empty plates. Some mornings I forget I'm allowed to eat without permission, but each meal, each bite, feels a little less like defiance and a little more like peace, and every time I walk past the open pantry, I remember that I don't have to earn it anymore. The mirror caught me in half light, the edges of my suit jacket a little worn but pressed as sharply as I could make them. It was the only proper suit I owned, bought secondhand years ago, but today it felt like armor. I smoothed the fabric over my knees as I waited in the lobby of Hale Manufacturing, listening to the faint hum of machines somewhere in the building. My heart beat faster with every passing second, but when they finally called my name, a strange calm settled over me. The interview wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. Questions about my welding certifications, about safety protocols, about how I handled pressure. For once, I had clear answers. I spoke about late nights in training, about adapting quickly on the floor. I told them the truth that I wanted something steady, somewhere I could build a future without having to move every 6 months. When the panel nodded and exchanged small glances, I allowed myself the tiniest breath of relief. An hour later, I walked back across the parking lot, sun glaring against the hood of my car, and for the first time in months, I felt taller. They hadn't given me the job outright, but their words, "We'll be in touch soon." "Expect good news," still rang in my ears. I gripped the steering wheel, imagining the look on Mom's face when I told her. She'd pretend to act surprised, but I hoped I might see a flicker of pride beneath it. On the drive home, I rehearsed the conversation in my head. How I'd start with the small details, how prepared I felt, how confident they seemed, and then save the good news for last. I pictured her setting down her phone for once, maybe even smiling, by the time I turned onto our street. My chest was full of anticipation, almost enough to drown out the faint unease I'd learned long ago never to ignore. I parked at the curb, straightened my jacket one last time, and walked toward the front door. That was when I noticed something strange about the upstairs window. The curtains were drawn tight. Even though Mom always left them open for the light, I pushed the door open, the sound of my heels against the hardwood echoing in the stillness. The house smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, as if Mom had just cleaned. I called out, trying to keep my voice bright. "Mom, I think I nailed it. They said to expect good news." No answer. I walked down the hall, the nerves of the interview still buzzing through me, until I reached my room. That's when I stopped cold. The door, my door, had a shiny new brass lock on it, not just a replacement knob, but a deadbolt. My breath caught, confused at first, then unsettled. I rattled the handle, but it didn't budge. "Mom." My voice cracked on the second try. She appeared at the end of the hallway, arms folded around herself, phone still in her hand. For a moment, I waited for her to explain it was temporary, that there'd been some mistake. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She stared at the floor, then at the wall, then back at her phone. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than air. "You don't live here anymore. Get out." I blinked, as if maybe I'd misheard. "What, Mom?" A voice behind me cut through. "Look at the parasite. Folks. Caught live." I turned and saw Evan, holding his phone high, streaming to whoever would watch. His grin was wide, desperate, like someone putting on a show too big for the stage. Before I could speak, Dad stepped out from the kitchen. His face was stone. "Real adults don't mooch at 28. Corinna, time to grow up." Through the open front door, I noticed shadows across the street, neighbors watching, phones out, recording the spectacle. My chest burned, but no words came. I stood there, the weight of their rejection pressing down, and realized I had nowhere in this house that was mine anymore. I turned back to the door, gripping the useless handle, and felt something inside me begin to break. Evan angled his phone toward me, his voice sliding into the fake energy he used for his streams. Here she is, Folks the family freeloader, finally getting what she deserves. He kicked one of the garbage bags at his feet, and my suitcase tumbled out, the zipper splitting so socks and paper scattered onto the grass. His laugh was sharp, but behind it I caught the nervous edge of someone desperate to hold an audience. I bent down, gathering what I could, my hands trembling but steady enough to fold the clothes back inside. Each time I reached for something, Evan narrated like it was sport. "See, she's really leaving. Guess adulthood came calling after all." Neighbors stood frozen across the street, some whispering, some filming. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I placed each piece carefully in the trunk of my car, as if deliberate movements could keep me from unraveling. Victor came down the steps then, his jaw tight. Without a word, he threw a set of keys at me. The edge struck my cheek with a dull thud before clattering to the driveway. "Take your junk and get out," he barked. "You're not our daughter anymore." I rubbed the spot on my face, then bent down to pick up the keys. Evan was still streaming, waiting for some meltdown. Instead, I slid the last bag into the trunk, closed it gently, and walked to the driver's seat. The street blurred as I pulled away, the sound of Evan's voice fading behind me. I drove without direction, the streets folding into one another until the familiar glow of Lena's apartment complex came into view. She opened the door without questions, just a quiet nod and space to breathe. As I set my torn suitcase on the floor, my eyes caught the envelope at the bottom of the side pocket, the one Esther had pressed into my hand before she died. I had promised myself I'd never open it unless things got bad. Now, the weight of it sat heavy in my lap, daring me to break that promise. I sat on Lena's couch with the envelope balanced across my knees, the paper already softened at the edges from months of handling but never opening. My fingers hovered for a long moment before I finally slid a nail under the flap. It opened cleanly, like it had been waiting. Inside was a folded letter in Esther's unmistakable hand, the careful cursive she had used on recipe cards and birthday notes. Along with it came several notarized documents and a business card from a downtown law office. My chest tightened before I even read the first line. Corinna. It began. If you are reading this, then what I feared has already come true. I could not protect you from them while I was alive, so I've done what I can now. My throat closed as I scanned the lines. She had placed part of the family home in my name, along with a share of the lakeside cabin and percentages of Victor's commercial property. Every page was signed, stamped, and bound in legal weight. Her final sentence read, "When they forget your worth. This will remind them." I leaned back, clutching the paper, and memory pulled me backward. Esther standing at the garden gate when I was 10, telling me not to let the neighbor's boy push me around. Esther pressing my hand to the table after my first welding burn, whispering, "Pain means you're learning, not that you're weak." Esther showing me how to balance a checkbook with patience Mom never gave me. She had always believed in me when no one else did, and even in death, she hadn't stopped. The pages shook in my hands, not from grief, but from something sharper, steadier clarity. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, slid the lawyer's card into my pocket, and knew I couldn't leave them buried anymore. By morning, I was ready to make a call. The next afternoon, I sat in the waiting room of Dorset and Lane, the envelope pressed against my lap like it was part of me. The building was old stone, ivy curling up its sides, the kind of place that looked built to withstand storms. When the receptionist called my name, I rose with legs that felt unsteady but determined. Mr. Dorset's office smelled faintly of leather and old paper. He was gray-haired, deliberate in his movements, and when he extended his hand, I caught a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I remember you," he said softly. "Your grandmother brought you here once. You carried a red sketchbook. Wouldn't put it down." I managed a small nod, sliding the envelope across his desk. He took his time, opening each page carefully, reading line by line with the precision of someone who had built a career on details. My pulse thudded with every turn of the paper. When he finally looked up, his expression was firm. "It's all valid. Every signature, every notarization binding and enforceable." He tapped the edge of one page. "Your grandmother made sure of it." The air left my chest in a rush I hadn't realized I'd been holding, but then he leaned back, folding his hands. "There's something more. These properties, particularly the lake cabin and the commercial building, have been generating rental income. I reviewed the records this morning. Your share, based on the trust, has not been disclosed to you." My mouth went dry. How much he glanced at his notes. Just over $50,000 over the last 3 years. "That money is yours. Corinna." "They've been keeping it from you." The number echoed in my head like steel striking steel. 50,000. Years of pretending I was a burden when all along. They were profiting behind my back. My hands shook, but not from fear, from clarity. Mr. Dorset slid the documents back toward me. "The decision is yours. We can proceed quietly, or we can challenge them directly." I gathered the papers with deliberate care, meeting his steady gaze. "Proceed," I said, He nodded once. Then let's begin. That night, the first wave of messages lit up my phone. By the time I left Mr. Dorset's office, my phone was already buzzing. First, it was a string of texts from Evan Hay. Don't be mad. The stream wasn't personal. It was just content. You know how the algorithm is. Then a voicemail from Dad, his tone clipped and dismissive. You're making this bigger than it is. No drama. Just come home and talk like an adult. An hour later, Mom's name filled my screen, her message swinging the other way. Please, sweetheart, don't do this. We can work it out as a family. The flood didn't stop. Every few minutes, another call, another notification, some angry, some pleading, none of them apologies. I forwarded them all to Mr. Dorset and left the phone face down on the table. That Friday evening, just after sunset, the pounding started. 3 sharp knocks rattled my apartment door, followed by Mom's voice. Higher than usual. Corinna, honey, please open up. We just want to talk. I stayed seated on the couch, eyes fixed on the small live feed from the security camera. There they were, Mom clutching a tissue, Dad standing stiff and red-faced, Evan off to the side holding his phone like he couldn't resist documenting even this. Open the door. Dad barked. You're acting like a child. I pressed the intercom button. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I spoke. All communication goes through my lawyer. You've been informed of this already. Silence. Mom's shoulders sagged, then she tried again. Softer. You don't have to do this. We'll delete the videos. We'll fix everything. Just let us in. Just the 4 of us. Through the lens, I saw Evan glance at his phone, then tilt it just slightly, as though recording without her noticing. The sight tightened my stomach, but it also steeled me. If you remain here, I said clearly, I will contact building security. Dad's face darkened, his jaw clenching hard enough to tremble. Mom dabbed at her eyes. Evan shifted uncomfortably, but kept filming. After a long minute, they turned and walked away without another word. Only when the hallway was empty did I let my hands shake. I locked the deadbolt, sat back down, and opened my laptop to find an email from Mr. Dorset waiting. The days that followed carried a different kind of noise. Evan's channel, once a steady stream of manufactured outrage and shallow stunts, began to fracture. Clips of my eviction circulated out of context, then back in full, until even strangers online were asking why he thought humiliating his sister counted as content. Comments piled up, sponsors quietly withdrew, and his follower count started to sink. His voice online grew louder in response, but the desperation showed. Dad wasn't spared either. When the banks reviewed property documents for a pending loan, the trust surfaced. Without my signature, his leverage collapsed. A client pulled out of a project days later, citing instability. I heard about it only because Mr. Dorset forwarded the notices with quiet efficiency. For a man like Victor Hale, reputation was currency, and now it was depreciating fast. Mom's messages shifted with the tides. One morning she texted, I can't sleep knowing you're angry at me. That night, how could you drag us through this? The next day, please, sweetheart, I'll do anything if you'll just talk to me. Guilt. Then blame. Then bargaining cycling so quickly it blurred into static. I kept my phone on silent and reached for a notebook instead. The first line came slow, but then they kept coming. Not rage, not revenge, just observations. What silence revealed, what their words masked, what I had mistaken for love. Esther's voice returned to me as I wrote, not in sound but memory. She had once held my hand after a fight with Evan and said, They'll call it betrayal when you stop letting them use you. Let them. It only means you finally learned. I closed the notebook, the quiet around me steady, and realized silence was no longer emptiness. It was power. The next morning, Mr. Dorset called with news of their counteroffer. Mr. Dorset's office felt different that morning, heavier somehow, as though even the air knew what was coming. Across the polished table sat their lawyer, a man I'd never met, flanked by a stack of papers and a thin, practiced smile. He slid the first offer across as if it were generous. "The family is prepared to transfer full ownership of the lake cabin to your client," he said smoothly, "provided she forego any claims to past or future income from the commercial property." I looked down at the page. No repayment, no accountability, just a symbolic gesture wrapped in legal language. My chest tightened, but not with doubt, with resolve. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "Here's what I want." I listed them one by one, steady as if I had rehearsed them for months. A formal payment plan for all unpaid rent, a third-party property management company overseeing income from both properties, and most important, a written admission of financial misrepresentation, signed by each of them. The lawyer's smile faltered. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "That's ambitious." Across the table, Victor's face reddened. "Absolutely not. We're not signing some confession to satisfy her ego." Evan scoffed, muttering about how ridiculous this all was. Diana pressed a tissue to her face, whispering that it wasn't supposed to go this far. I folded my hands on the table and met each of their eyes in turn. "Then we don't have a deal." The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of the clock on the wall. Victor slammed his fist once against the arm of his chair, muttering curses under his breath. But even his anger couldn't shift the fact that their position was crumbling. By the end of the meeting, the lawyer gathered the papers and nodded stiffly. "We'll concede to her terms." When the final draft was placed before me, I read it carefully, then added one line above my signature in my own handwriting. "Truth isn't betrayal. It's what remains when the performance ends." The pen barely left the page before I knew nothing would be the same again. The lease was mine, signed with my name alone. The apartment wasn't much uneven floorboards, a draft in the kitchen window that whistled when the wind picked up, but it was mine. No one could change the locks. No one could tell me I didn't belong. I filled the shelves Lena had cleared with the books I managed to salvage, their spines still bent from being shoved into garbage bags. I folded my clothes neatly into the narrow dresser and set my dented monitor on the desk like it was a crown jewel. Each piece was imperfect, but every one of them felt earned. The welding job wasn't glamorous, but each Friday when the paycheck hit my account, I paid the rent directly from it. No borrowed money, no silent debts hanging over me. For the first time in years, I breathed without guilt pressing down. One afternoon, an envelope slid through the mail slot. Inside was the first repayment check, stapled to a short note written in Diana's familiar hand. "Please come back. Let's be a family again." I sat at the table and read it twice, waiting for the weight of her words to settle, but there was no apology. No acknowledgement of the months I'd spent as their spectacle, or the years they'd taken from me in silence. Only a plea to erase the past as if forgetting counted for forgiveness. I folded the note back into the envelope, tucked it into the drawer, and left the check untouched on the counter. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't twist. There was nothing left to answer. That night, while unpacking the last box, I found the old drive Esther had given me. The external drive was scratched and old, the label nearly worn away. I hadn't touched it in years, but when I plugged it in, a folder blinked to life on the screen. Among the documents and photos was a file labeled simply Wave. I clicked it, and after a moment of static, her voice filled the room. "Hey, kiddo, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. But I want you to remember something. Some people only value you when they can use you. And when you stop letting them, they'll call it betrayal. Let them. You just keep being you." The words landed like a steady hand on my shoulder. I leaned back, eyes closed. and let the sound wash over me. Tears came, but they weren't the hot, bitter kind I'd carried for weeks. They were quiet, releasing something I hadn't known I'd been holding. It wasn't grief that tightened my chest. It was peace. I copied the file to my computer, backed it up twice, and saved it to the cloud. I wouldn't lose her voice again. Then I opened my journal, added a final line beneath the others, and slid it into the drawer beside the drive. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, but it didn't feel empty. For the first time in my life, the space around me belonged wholly to me. No shadows of their judgment, no weight of their silence, only my breath and Esther's steady reminder that I was enough. I closed the drawer gently, knowing that some voices never fade. Not when they teach you how to stand.